everyone. My name is Taryn with Quest, and today's presentation is Data Privacy and Managing Sensitive Information in PeopleSoft HCM. So a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All attendee lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout this session. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put those into the question drop-down box. We'll answer those at the end of today's session. And this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Quest content library, and everyone will receive an email when that is available. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Julie from Oracle.
Hello, everybody. My name is Julie Alonso. I'm the product strategist for PeopleSoft Human Resources. And I have a few other Oracle folks on the call assisting me today.
Hi, this is Joe Willever, another Oracle product strategist. I spend most of my time in the financials area, but also am responsible for the Page Field Configurator, which we're going to look at today.
Hello,
hi everybody. My
name is Go ahead.
Sorry, my name's Kelly Mills. I'm also from Oracle, and I'm on the development side of the Page Field Configurator. Sorry, Srini, go ahead.
Thanks, Kelly. Sorry about that. Hey, myself, Srini Prabhakara. I'm with the PeopleSoft HCM architecture team. So I'm working with the strategists and the PMs on the data masking projects.
So myself, I'm pretty functional, so I do have some technical counterparts assisting me. So thank you guys. So if you guys do have questions, as Taryn mentioned, please put them in the chat. We are planning to spend some time at the end if you guys do have questions, both functional and technical. So one thing I do want to mention too, that we do support 22 country extensions for PeopleSoft HR. I know primarily most people on this call are probably based in the US, but you guys might have a global presence. So we do support all of these for HR legs and regs. Another thing too, what I do is I work with some of my counterparts in the different countries, and we do post blogs of when there are updates both for the US and for different countries like those 22 that we support. So if you guys want to know when we have changes, both payroll and for HR for these countries, both including the US, I do send out emails as soon as we post them. So you guys can always go out to peoplesoftinfo.com, or you can just email me and I can add you to a distribution list. So we do have newsletters and regulatory updates that we do send out. So if you want to, just let me know. Again, you can just email me. My name's at the end of the slide, but also julie.alonso@Oracle. So just let me know if you want to be added to any of the legislation updates that you currently don't get them. So today we're going to talk about data privacy. There's been some pretty big initiatives going around the world. The biggest one is GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. I'm just going to talk briefly about that. Some of you guys may have heard about this, but I still have some customers I meet that don't know about it. So I'm going to spend some time on this because it's pretty important. And with GDPR, it regulates the processing of data for European individuals, which is about 28 countries in the EU, and for which that includes the collection, storage, transfer, or use of. So this is the most important part. Any organization that processes personal data of an EU individual is within the scope of the law, most importantly, regardless of whether your organization has a physical presence in Europe. So if I'm a French citizen and I apply for a job at your organization in New York, you've just collected my personal data through your recruiting system, regardless if it's PeopleSoft, Taleo, PageUp. You've just collected my organization, and now you are on the hook for this GDPR legislation. So just keep that in mind, though, if you're collecting any personal data for an individual, regardless if you don't even have a presence or an office in Europe, you are still required to obey this law. So a little bit about GDPR. It's a request for consent. So employees must be given a legible and easily accessible form. A lot of this came out too with Facebook last year with Cambridge Analytica, and people didn't realize that their data was being sold because they had like 23-page consent form. So now, if you've gone to Facebook recently, Instagram, to look at their data privacy, It's very clear, very concise as to who they're selling the information to or who can collect it, such as police agencies. So they provide you a very detailed list of who's collecting it and who they're selling your information to. Also part of GDPR is the right to access. So employees can obtain from your organization who's getting the information. You know, you can have to tell them if you're sending it to a third-party benefits provider. If you're collecting it for a third-party payroll, the employees have the right to ask who's getting your information. Also, too, that would affect you guys within PeopleSoft is the right to be forgotten. And this applies both to employees or applicants that they can request after they've left your organization for you to erase their personal data and cease from continuing to use it. If you guys don't know, GDPR went into effect last May 2018. So we did put a lot of functionality within PeopleSoft to help this data privacy, because it's a pretty big deal, and we have a lot of customers that we support in Europe, as well as a ton of customers in the US that do even have a European presence for our global customers. The penalties are pretty high under GDPR. It's 4% of your annual revenue or 20 million pounds, whichever is greater. And I did run into a customer last year at Collaborate, and they are based in the state of Washington, but they do have a European presence, some employees. And those employees in France filed a complaint because they were in breach of GDPR. They knew that they didn't implement GDPR, but they chose not to, and they did get fined. He told me it was more than 200,000, but less than 2 million. So I am starting to hear about a few customers that are getting fined. But I mean, they knew that they weren't planning on implementing it. They have now since implemented it. So just so you know, they are taking action in Europe. So that's for our European. Like I said, too, this could affect you. So I would recommend even going through your employees' personal data and see what countries they're originating from. If they have in the country field, see if you have anybody from Europe, or look at the visa information, because you have collected that personal information for those employees, as well as maybe possibly any applicants. So there are some fields within PeopleSoft that you can just easily query to see how affected your organization might be. A little closer to home, California was the first state to pass this. It's the Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. It's very, very similar to GDPR. You also have the request for consent, the right to be forgotten. The little bit difference here is for those parents out there, the children's rights, it makes it a little bit more difficult to share and sell the children's information that are younger than 16. Who has to comply? Organizations have to comply if they receive personal data from California residents, even if your parent or subsidiary company, and if your annual gross revenue is 25 million. So most customers would hit that very easily. This was a little bit, this went into effect about 3 weeks ago. So I'm not aware of any customers that have had complaints against them or a breach. The way they do the penalty is the state attorney will take action. It's going to be $7,500 per violation. So of course, California, typically, if you guys have been around following HR and payroll, California is typically the first state to enact legislation, and then it usually goes Washington State, Oregon, New York, Massachusetts. That's where we kind of see other states doing that, and then the federal government will kind of start passing laws. We see that around like sick leave or non-binary. So last year, these following states have also introduced data privacy legislation, very similar to what California has, and that's also Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Hawaii, New York, and Maryland. So right now it's just going through the legislature and the Senate, and eventually maybe to the governor. So right now they've just been introduced. They have not been laws yet, but it's something to keep out for. So I continue monitoring this, and I suspect that we'll probably have some additional states being added to this list in 2020. To help you guys too, so for the part where you have to have the employee's consent, we did deliver the Acknowledgement Framework. So we've seen a lot of customers use this within, especially for new employees, with the onboarding feature, or maybe for another good place is benefits enrollment. So it is fluid-based, but with here, it's very easy to configure. And you just put here the acknowledgement if you want a text box, if you want it to be a checkbox, and you just connect it to the activity guide. So this is what it would look like for onboarding. So we've delivered that as part of the template. So when you come in here, you have an acknowledgement step, and then you can look at the view, the terms and conditions, and that the employee can agree to this as well. So again, you can, we've seen customers typically do this with benefits open enrollment or with onboarding. This way you can have the employee consent to what information is being collected, that they understand that, yes, my information is being collected for payroll, for maybe a third-party benefit. Another one is the person dated delete process. So we've always had the ID delete, but we've made some enhancements to that where now you can exclude certain records from being deleted. So maybe I want to delete everything but pay data. We delivered 2 new features too, and that's the applicant delete and the new learner delete, which is part of ELM. And that's due to partially due to GDPR and also California, where we have to delete the employee or applicant's information. We've had this part of People Tools for a while now, and that's the data archiving manager. And so People Tools provides some data archiving frameworks. So we deliver the templates for you guys. It identifies criteria for rows to be archived using PS query, and also the ability to delete some of that information. Now, we don't deliver everything. We just deliver some things as templates, and then it's up to the customer to then decide what you guys want to data archive. We also have the data privacy framework. For those of you who've been kind of involved with GDPR back in early 2018 when we knew we were starting to deliver some of the functionality for that, we first had a spreadsheet and we went through and we identified everything that we considered sensitive or personal. And we first came out with a spreadsheet. Now we've put that online. And just, you know, throughout the HCM application, this also includes global, there's about 8,000 fields within the PeopleSoft HCM, which could be considered personally identifiable or sensitive. So if you guys haven't seen it yet, we have the spreadsheet, but now we've also put it online. I'll navigate there so you guys can know where it's at. So it's under, if you go all the way out through the navigator, it's under Enterprise Components, and then it's under Data Privacy Framework. So this is important. This will probably be in conjunction with both a functional and technical person. But if you go into Maintain Data Privacy, so I'm just going to take a look at one of our products. So eProfile, a lot of people use that. So we have gone through, it was a very painstaking task with a lot of people on our development team too. We went through all of the 8,000 fields and we marked them as personally identifiable or sensitive. This is Oracle's take. You may disagree, so you are more than welcome to change these fields, but we felt it was easier for us to deliver all those 8,000 fields with how we interpreted it. We also met with the Oracle Cloud team, so the overall consensus kind of within Oracle. So this is our interpretation. This is not from GDPR, from any government regulation. So again, this is Oracle's interpretation. So we've gone through and we have identified that too. And we also can build in references. So this is where everything kind of links together, and I'll show you why this is important a little bit later on through the presentation when we do a demo of the Page and Field Configurator for data masking. So here we have everything that, you know, within profile management. You can click here that regarding address. So we have the component name, the page name. We also have the navigation. So we have a ton of information. This is for every field that we have identified as sensitive or personal within an organization. And sometimes you may not think something's sensitive or personal, but if I have, under a lot of companies have the tracks, you know, higher education. So if I went to Notre Dame, you might be able to determine what my religion is. based on me having Notre Dame as my university. Or sometimes if you guys track meal preferences, if I mark my meal as kosher, that's considered sensitive or personal identifying. So there's a ton of fields within the PeopleSoft HCM application that you could personally identify or sensitive fields for it. So once you start thinking about it, there are a ton. And so we want to be able to identify those. I don't have any of this marked now because I haven't run the process, but within all those fields, you can also see what queries, what custom reports you guys might have, any searches or analytics that also have sensitive fields in them. The important part here is that these are all PeopleSoft delivered fields. So we've identified, those 8,000 fields that we own that are part of the HCM application, but we have this little add button here. This is for you to add your custom fields, because you guys might have custom fields that contain sensitive or personally identifying information, and you want to add it here so that way when you run the managed reference process, it will pick up also any queries you guys might have, your pages. This is a way for you guys to track all of your sensitive and personal identifiable information within the PeopleSoft application. So it's important for you guys to spend some time going through all your custom mods and seeing what fields might be sensitive or personal and add them to this page. So I just wanted to point that out here too. So again, it's under the enterprise component under the data privacy framework. And I have page shots in the presentation as well, but something for you guys aren't aware of to take a look at and spend some time around. I also have a list here too, because a lot of customers of the things I just showed you, they want to know what image it came out in. So here's all the different images, as well as if there's any people tools requirements. So we kind of have a general summary of everything that you guys need to know of what feature it was and when we delivered it for HCM. We also have a ton of documentation posted out there, VFOs, blogs, so tons of papers out there. So here's all the links and all the information too, if you guys need to find out some more information about data privacy. So the big part of this presentation is going to be talking about some of the new Page and Field Configurator enhancements that we've made to help you with your data privacy masking. So if you guys aren't familiar with Page and Field Configurator, it's an awesome tool. Both functional and technical people can use it. It's fairly easy to use. And it gives you the ability to modify fields, gray out fields, hide fields. So anything that maybe you had labeled before and you didn't like the way that what PeopleSoft had before, you had to customize it. Now with Page and Field Configurator, you can come in and be part of configuration, as well as maybe hiding a field. If you guys don't use that smoker field that's in personal data, you can hide that field so it doesn't display, as well as within self-service. With certain fields that you guys don't need and want to clean up the page a little bit more, you can use Page and Field Configurator to do that. And it's considered configuration and not a customization to do that. So we do have data masking now with Page and Field Configurator. I know that some of those have implemented GDPR or part of what California, the Consumer Act. We did have a solution that we delivered early in 2018 for data masking. I put that in quotes that was a kind of a hard-coded solution for HCM because we could only mask 5 different fields, and that was date of birth, driver's license, banking information, visa, and SSN. So it was set up on the installation table. So I know some of you guys maybe have that as well. So it was only 5 fields. Now the really cool part with Page and Field Configurator, given the ability to provide data masking, is it can be for any field within PeopleSoft. And that includes within HCM, Campus Solutions, Finance. For the HCM side, we will be the first ones delivering part of this feature and functionality. It will be targeted for image 33, which, if you guys don't know, is targeted to post this Friday, January 24th. It's important too that the People Tools requirement is 857.11 to use the data masking through Page and Field Configurator. The other pillars are aware of this too. So you'll see Campus Solutions, Finance, they'll start uptaking this new data masking later in early 2020 as well. but we're ready to start posting it for HCM. We probably have the most sensitive information, but then Campus Solutions, and then Finance. So I'll do 2 demos today. I first want to show you one of the ones that we get a lot of inquiries on to data mask is SSN. And the one that we don't mask is within self-service. So we have had customers ask for the enhancements for us to mask this in self-service. We aren't planning on it. We want employees to be able to come in here and to see what their SSN is and verify it for payroll reporting and stuff like that. Some customers, you can mask it through Page and Field Configurator. You can hide it through Page and Field Configurator, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So right now, some customers, if you want to have an employee come in and verify that in December, like this is my SSN, and then mask it for the entire year from January on once you send out the W-2s, that's totally fine. So what you can do is from Page and Field Configurator, which is part of Enterprise Components, so the only thing I've done is I went and I know what page it was. I did what the component name was. So I've already added that. I said, I want to hide the SSN. So if I come in here, I've already added the field, but to come in here, I can say you can do it partially. You can mask, the characters. You can use a star, what length. I want to do everything but the last 4. And I come in here. So this is all new. This is what's going to be delivered in image 33. So we have new fields within Page and Field Configurator, and Joe will go into a little bit more detail during his section on the technical part of it. But you can come in here, I can hit save. So now I've already selected the field. I said I want it to mask for everything but the last 4 for employee self-service. Just like, usually my database isn't this slow. I apologize. So now if I come into employee self-service, additional information, you can see here that the social security number, it's masked everything but the last 4 digits. So you can totally control if you want to hide the field through Page and Field Configurator or if you want to mask it. So the new function that we delivered is the masking. And the other example I want to show you too that a lot of customers I know want to mask too because it's very sensitive is employee salary information. So I'll show you how you can do full masking now. So you just pick Doug Lewis. He's in, your demo databases. He's the president. So if I come over for compensation, I just want to show you guys here that you can see his compensation. You can see his comp rate amount. You guys are familiar with job data. If I go back to Page and Field Configurator, again, I've already added this field, so I've added the component of job data. So now I want to pick those two fields. So I come in here, I hit Select Fields. And if you remember when we looked at the references where you can add your custom fields to identify which ones are sensitive or personally identifiable, this is where this comes into play too. And this would also include any of your custom fields. So I want to come here and I want to pick compensation. And as you see, I have 73 fields. But if I click, I want to just see anything that's like sensitive or personal. Now I'm brought back with 6. So that's how it's referenced to on that page. So it pulls that information in from that data privacy page that we had in the framework that we looked at just a little bit earlier. So you can kind of see how it pulls all the information in through all of PeopleSoft HCM and can identify it that way as well. So I want to say I want to mask the comp rate and the compensation. And I want to do full masking. So I just hit save. So you can see now for Doug Lewis and for all employees, the compensation rate is fully masked as well as the comp rate. And Joe will go a little bit more detail too. So you can have, your super users like your Betty Lockerty, she can see it all employees. But maybe a Rosanna Channing, who we use in our test database, who's maybe an HR rep, maybe she'll have it masked. So you can pick who you want to have it masked for. You can exclude certain people, just one person. So you have a lot of configuration and control around what you want to have masked and who can see it. And Joe will cover that a little bit later on too.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Okay, I'm gonna talk about a couple of the components that are used by the Page and Field Configurator. There's something called the masking profile, which is where you define how the user will see information on the page. And then we're going to look at the field group capabilities, and this is where you identify a default masking profile to a group of fields that have a similar masking requirement. Okay. I think, Julie, next slide, or yeah, we'll do the demo now. Yeah, okay, we'll show this real quickly, sure. Actually, why don't we just go into the demo? So, Taryn, if you could pass over the share to me, that would be great.
I'll do that, Joe.
Okay, Julie. And if you could also log out, then I will log in. All right, wonderful.
All right, I'm out.
Okay. All right. Okay, so these components are also under Enterprise Components, and we'll go first to the mask profile. So again, this is where you define how the user will see the information on the page, and we'll deliver a few of these profile IDs. We're going to look at one that is called Date Year Mask, and with this, we're actually going to mask the year field as part of the date that's shown. So we have masking types. We've got complete, date, setup table based, and then unmasked trailing characters. And we'll take a look at each of these. On the date one, pretty self-explanatory here. Again, you define which of these three attributes you like to mask. Is it the day, the month, the year, all three? You define the character. Right now we have an asterisk and an X there. And you also define if you want to retain the separators or like the dashes. So this is a profile for masking the year field as part of a date. Full, pretty self-explanatory here. This is a complete masking. So all of the characters would be masked. And then again, we define the character and whether or not we want to retain the separators. And you would identify one masking profile as a default for your organization. So if not otherwise identified, when adding a field to Page and Field Configurator, the default mask profile will come through and be used for the field. And you can override that at the component level if you'd like to. The partial for characters, so Julie used this one earlier. This is where we, again, pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to unmask a certain number of characters at the end of the field. In this case, it's 4, and again, you define whether or not you want to retain the separators or not. And then the last one is something that we're identifying as masking based upon a setup table. And basically, the setup table option provides you a way of using other tables and fields to do your masking. So in this example, we had some existing masking functionality that was already in place for national ID, and this is being stored in the NID type table and in this particular field, the HCSCM NID mask field. This actually stores the masked value. So if you want to use this setup table or configuration to do your masking, you could do that by selecting the setup table based masking type. So really it's a way of applying some existing masking functionality that you might have already had through Page and Field Configurator. You might also want to use this if you have masking requirements that are a bit more unique and not provided through what we deliver through a full or a trailing number of characters or a specific date mask. This is where you could store that information in another configuration place. So in this example, the fields that are used as criteria are the country and the national ID type, and then the defaults come through. So setup table based, again, if you need it, is available. If you can get by with full or a partial or a date mask, you can use those as well. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is the field group. All right, so the field group, again, is a way of identifying a default masking profile to really a group of fields that have a similar masking requirement. So we'll go ahead and look at the date year one. So I created a field group called date year, and for all the fields listed here, the default mask profile will be the date year mask. So we just looked at that a moment ago, and this is a masking of the year. So anytime birth date shows up or the coverage begin, elect date, end date, disability date, etc., all of these fields, their default masking profile will be just the year. So if I were to use Page and Field Configurator and identify birth date as something to mask, it would come through with a default of the year being masked. And I could change that to something else if I needed to within Page and Field Configurator, but here is where you basically identify the defaults for your fields. And each field can be listed in one field group only as its default. Okay. Now I also want to go back, and I'm going to go back now to Page and Field Configurator and look at a couple of the other options that were added through masking just recently. So we're going to go ahead and look at the job data, and a couple of things to call out here. First off, we have sequences, and we've always had sequences in Page and Field Configurator. The add here is the ability to set some of these as inactive, so we provide some statusing capabilities. So if you've used Page and Field Configurator in the past, you might be familiar with the sequences. So if you have more complex components that need to look or behave differently based upon different criteria, you might have multiple sequences. And right now you could have up to 99 sequences for each of your components. So now you'll be able to status those. Julie showed how we can mask page fields. The other option is masking search fields. It works similarly. It's just that they do need to be on a separate sequence. So if we have a search page that has some sensitive information, we can select those fields and mask those as well. In this case, it looks like we don't have any in the data privacy framework, but those could be added there, and that would be a way of filtering down the fields for masking. I'm going to go back here to the sequence that Julie set up. You see the mask profile came through as full because that's the default profile. If I wanted to, I could go in and change this to another value, let's say partial 4, okay, and it would then allow me to change this on a component by component basis as kind of an override, and would tell you online that it was also changed from the default value. The apply additively selection here at the sequence level, this is new, and what this does, when this is selected, it means that this sequence will be evaluated always, and it will be evaluated in addition to any other Page and Field Configurator sequences. So if you think about it, we've always had Page and Field Configurator to do things such as label changes. So we need the data masking configurations to be applied in addition to those sequences. So whenever this box is selected, it means that these sequences will be evaluated in addition to any other Page and Field configuration configurator configurations that you had already in place. And the default here is selected as you would expect for the masking configurations. We move over to the user list tab. Julie talked about this earlier. You have a couple of options here. One is first off, this is where you define which roles or users that this configuration should be applied to, or maybe those who should be excluded from this configuration and being impacted by it. So we can define our criteria at either the header level, which means that it applies to all the sequences, or we can have separate sequence level criteria as well. So some of the options, we've got all users with some that are excluded roles and users. So in this example for job, maybe we want it to apply to everyone except for, let's say, the HCM administrator, security administrator, and maybe the benefits admin. Maybe not the best example, but multiple roles could be excluded. And then we can also exclude specific users as well. So if we have a power user that really needs to see everything without the masking, you can identify those users here. So this is a new option that was added that you'll see as part of the masking solution. This is also available on the standard configurations as well. The other option is selected users, probably not too popular, but is available if you want to identify specific users who are only those to be impacted by this particular configuration. Single role with exceptions, this is the one we've always had with Page and Field Configurator, where you identify a particular role that's impacted, and then any specific users that need to be excluded from being impacted by the configuration. Probably not as applicable for masking. either. And then we also have multiple roles that can be used with some exceptions there as well. So with these extensions here, really I think we've probably got everything covered to help identify you pretty quickly which roles and users should be impacted by the masking functionality. Okay, and then lastly, you'll see here at the top, the configuration type is masking. And this is really the start of this when you add a new masking profile, excuse me, a new mask, a new page and field configurator masking. What you do is you identify the component and the market, and then you identify if it's a masking configuration or a standard. So everything that you had previously in HCM or financials, those are all what we consider standard configurations. And then what we've added here that we've showed today are the masking configurations. So this is a way for you to also separate out who does what. This requires a separate access to be able to see the masking configuration types, but it's a way of breaking out the access to standard configurations for things like label changes from the masking configurations, which we found would potentially be done by somebody else in the organization. Okay, Julie, if we could go back to that other, well, actually, I guess I need to stop sharing here, and then we'll go to the rest of the PowerPoint. Okay, I think you're the presenter now, Julie. If you could share that. Okay, there we go. We did that. We did that. One more, I think, here. Okay, great. So some of the enhancements to the Page and Field Configurator tool, we talked about the top two. The third bullet, the tool has been extended to your secondary pages or your modal windows. The fields on those can now be configured to work differently based upon Page and Field Configurator. This would be masking as well as standard configurations. We talked about the change to the user criteria. We've talked about the statusing of sequences if you need to. The last two have been out for quite a while now. I'll just quickly mention these. The tool was made available to fluid components. As part of that, you can also use the form factor as criteria. So probably not as applicable on data masking, but you could, for example, identify certain smaller devices or smaller form factors to have less fields than some of your larger form factors. That's one use case that we've seen. So with the rollout to fluid components, you can also use the form factor size as criteria for that. And then the criteria has also been extended, so now it includes more wildcarding for things like contains and like and that type of thing. Okay, next slide, Julie. Okay, so something on the roadmap, it's not going to be available later this week in HCM, but we are working on the masking of query output. It'll be part of another image later this year. And what you can see is basically you'll identify the records and the fields that should be masked as part of the output. Okay, Julie, I think that's all for my part. I think the next slide is yours.
Yep, so just a little bit more some of the common questions that we get around data privacy, and that's around data scrambling, auditing of it, and then two-factor authentication. So for data masking and scrambling, now that we do have data masking that can be delivered as part of Page and Field Configurator, we also, Oracle Consulting does provide data scrambling for masking at the database level. We typically see customers using this for non-prod or for testing databases. So for more information on data scrambling, you can contact Oracle Consulting and they can assist you if you guys don't have a solution yet. Also too, for allow view auditing, PeopleTools does provide the ability to do audits on changes to applicant or employee data, but it is limited to just changes, not who views the data. So if I come into personal data, you don't know if I looked at the SSN, what information I was actually looking at. So it doesn't provide anything on the viewing of it, just what changes have been made to the data within HCM. But we do have auditing available within PeopleTools. Also, for two-factor authentication, we do have some documentation out there. We do also have a number of partners that offer solutions. So we're not in a position to recommend any of those third parties. So you can use the PeopleSoft knowledge base or some of the different listservs if you want to find out what other customers are using. But we also have a number of customers that also use event mapping with some of these vendors to create additional logins or to help protect the sensitive information. So, some of your employees or applicants don't get phished. And so kind of just in summary, we have a lot of things that we have delivered primarily for GDPR as well as for California over the last 2 years. So for the notice and consent, that's where the employees have to acknowledge, yes, you are collecting my information. We do have the Acknowledgement Framework. For the separation of duties, we do have the Data Privacy Framework, Data Masking, and also Page and Field Configurator. And for the data deletion or the right to be forgotten as part of the data privacy regulations, we have the person delete, applicant delete, and also the learner delete that we've delivered. And to minimize or retention, we have the Data Archive Manager. For data portability, we have PS Query or BI Publisher. And the right to access. Employees can see what information is being collected or what information they have about them that you guys have collected. They can see a lot of information through self-service or through reporting. So Taryn, if you want to, you guys, I'm not sure if you got any questions yet for the panel here that we have. We have about 10 minutes or so that we can answer some questions.
Yeah, so I do have a few questions that came in. So if anyone else has any more questions, please put those into the question drop-down box. So I will go ahead with the first question. So once the field is masked, would the individual for whom the field was masked, when they run a query or a report, will they be seeing the data unmasked or will it be masked in the output?
So with the image that's being released this week, the query output would not be masked, but with a future image, there would be capabilities to mask the output based upon the user. It was part of the roadmap slide.
Okay. And if we have current PFC edits in place, will there be conversion efforts when we update to PUM 33?
Answer is no, there should not be. The current PFC configurations should come through as a standard configuration type. You would see that online. They would all be set to be standard. Any new configurations that you create would be masking, or if you wanted to create additional standard configurations, you could do that as well. So the answer is no. Yep.
So what will happen if they run the SQRs? Will it be mask and report output as well?
Sereni,
I thought we were just doing BI Publisher, correct?
Yes, this is Srini here. So we are doing query, and because of query, the BI Publisher, which uses query as source, will be masked in an upcoming image. But SQR, we currently do not have masking of SQR reports in the current roadmap.
Okay. And the next question, so Julie, you mentioned about being able to see data on ESS, for example, based on date. I did not see one. Did you simply mean go in and change the date mask flag, or is there a date you can use to say available from 1/1 through 1/31?
And Joe, I don't think, is there an effective date as to when to mask within Page and Field Configurator, or does it just take effect immediately?
It would take effect when you set the status to active. So if you did have a requirement to start seeing some mask information, let's say after the beginning of your fiscal year, you could then go in on that the beginning of the fiscal year and set the configuration to active. That's the way you would do it now. There really is no effective dating with respect to PFC tool.
Right, that's what I thought. So if you're doing
Yeah.
like the W-2 example where you can have employees verify their W-2s, you can send out like a mass email saying, please go in and verify it. So maybe you unmask it for December, then you would go in like January 1st, and then you can mask it, and then it would be masked, the entire year until you guys decided to unmask it again.
Right. I guess you would probably use the status field most easily to say,
Right.
inactive during that month of December.
Okay, so to kind of follow up from that question, so query and BI is being released at a later PUM, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Where it's being actively developed right now. So we would see that we have PeopleSoft, so we have, working development, but it will not be released in image 33, which is coming out this Friday, but it's something that's being actively developed and tested internally. And
Okay.
this is just for HCM. Finance and Campus Solutions might have it a later date on their roadmap, but I know that they're aware of this too as well. So they should also be releasing it sometime in 2020.
Okay, so the next question, in CRM for viewing cases, does a page and field configuration apply on top of display template?
I've never had that question before. Kelly or Sereni, do you guys know anything on that? I'm not sure what the template functionality is in CRM.
Yeah, this is Kelly. So the page and field configurator fires off using event mapping. So it fires off typically in the post-build process. So whenever that template, and I'm with Joe, I'm not a CRM expert, and I haven't looked at that, but wherever that template goes, wherever it fires off as PeopleSoft processes the data in the component, if it happens prior to the post-build event, then yes, it would be masked. But if it happens after the component's build and post-build fires off, then it would not. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. And the next question, would you recommend replacing current configured SSN masking with PFC masking?
And so, as I mentioned before, back in early 2018, when Gdpr came out, we had to deliver something because it was a critical time. And so we picked the most commonly 5 fields that we had a data mask, and we created, like I said in quotes, a custom solution, because it was pretty much a hard code solution because you could only mask those 5 fields, which were, again, SSN, date of birth, banking information, visa information, and driver's license. And so we have that. You can, of course, continue using that, especially if you've already delivered it and you are currently using it. That solution won't go away. It's, you have to check it on the HR installation table. If you are also looking, if you have not implemented data privacy yet, I would definitely recommend using Page and Field Configurator, since that way you can do additional masking. I think the Page and Field Configurator is much more flexible with what the new things that you can have around the configuration part, as well as the different types of roles or exclusions. So you're more than welcome to continue using the solution that you already have if you've implemented it. And then at some point, if you find you want more flexibility, go to Page and Field Configurator. If you have not implemented the original data privacy masking, I would definitely recommend using Page and Field Configurator and going forward just with that masking, because that's the direction that we're going to have, since that's what we're using, since it crosses both all the PeopleSoft applications, HCM, Finance, Campus Solutions. Everybody would be using Page and Field Configurator.
Okay. And how does data masking work with pivot grids?
So, like Joe explained just now, pivot grids use PS queries as data source. So once we have the masking ability built for PS queries, which is going to come up in some later image, the pivot grids will automatically be covered.
Okay. And the next question, is there a reason for not developing CAC PIV authentication within PeopleSoft?
I'm not familiar. I'll say for my part, I'm not familiar with that on the technical side. Is anyone else on the call familiar with
I've
that
never
question?
heard of that, and I'm not sure what it stands for.
Yeah, me either.
Okay, we'll go ahead to the next question. So can we mask only in display and then unmask if the employee needs to change something? For example, direct deposit?
No, it would be applied in. Kelly, you could correct me if I'm wrong. I think it would be applied in either mode.
Yeah, if the criteria is set up for that employee or that person, whatever the criteria is, then the masking would fire off and it would be masked. There could be that's out of the box how Page and Field Configurator would work. There could be further code that would be added via event mapping as a customization that could be done to later on unmask it, but that's not anything that's delivered outside of the box, in the box, delivered now.
Okay, so that is the last question that we had. So I just want to thank you all again for coming and answering everyone's questions and presenting with everyone today.
Thank you, Quest, for hosting it.
Thank you, Taryn.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. And just a quick reminder to all the attendees that this was recorded and it will be on the Quest content library and everyone will receive an email when that is available. So thanks again and everyone have a great day.